Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here in Chisinau, and I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me. And with that, I'll get on. My topic today, as I say, is what can Moldova learn from the East European countries that have already joined the EU, both good and bad. There's good and bad lessons to be learned from it. And I'm just going to outline how I'm going to do it. I'm going to first look at what the association agreement is and what its benefits are. Then I'm going to do my conclusions, general conclusions, and more specific policy recommendations or suggestions for Moldova. I'm going to put that first because it takes up a lot of time. And then I'm going to show the more interesting, colourful graphs which back up the conclusions that I've come to. So this is the first one, which lays out on one side what the elements of the association agreement are. The first one is the political aspect, which I'm not going to concentrate on because that's not my area of speciality. The second one is the visa liberalisation regime, and the one we're talking about today is the economic, DCFTAs. Two main parts to that. First one is the free trade agreement, which is a rather traditional kind. It's where the export duties on both sides are pulled down, and the import duties on EU products coming into Moldova gradually reduced over time, as previous speakers have said, to give Moldovan producers time to adjust to foreign competition. The second, and perhaps more important part from Moldova, is the harmonisation of business rules outside, not just trade, but in the commercial sector more generally, starting with the procurement sector, public procurement sector, which in a lot of countries of the former Soviet Union are among the most corrupt parts of the system. So I think I'm going to concentrate on that part throughout my talk because I think that's the key element, not just for Moldova, but it's also even more so for someone like Ukraine, and perhaps eventually for Russia. So moving on to the second half of this slide, we've got at the top we've got the promised long-term benefits, and as you can see I've put a pair of rose-coloured glasses because sometimes this is criticised for being too optimistic and not presenting a warts-and-all picture of the negative aspects that might come with it. As you can see, the main benefits are in trade gains, that's the ones that we talked about. And the institutions, that's what I talked about with the harmonisation of rules, that's a key element of long-term growth, and living standards, which was through gradual wage convergence, through reduction of prices, and through better quality products. That's always what people have already said. The problem with these long-term benefits is that the long-term benefits come in the long term and the costs come up front. And this is where the political controversy lies, not just in Moldova but abroad. And this is what Russia in particular tries to concentrate on to try and prevent it, to emphasise the negative aspects of it. So we can look at the administrative costs, that's not especially interesting one. The more important one that we have talked about is that competitiveness is the means of reallocating scarce resources to the most efficient companies. That means some companies aren't going to be efficient. Some firms are going to go under, some people are going to lose their job. That's a normal part of it. So that's something that we have to address if we're going to see how the EU Association Agreement can be made to work for all people. These are my broad conclusions. This is just a general level from what you can see from the data about those who've gone through the EU integration process already. The first conclusion, the most important one, is that they have done better economically in terms of economic welfare. As Adrian said to me yesterday, not as well as you might have expected, but you can see the data that it is there. So the association agreement sets out some of the means by which Moldova can follow in their footsteps to achieve those gains. First one, as I've already said, is the sort of one-off free trade reallocation of resources. The second one is the sort of more long-term harmonisation of rules, which supports institutions and supports factory inputs, which is investment and labour. So that's the two traditional factors of sustained long-term growth. What I want to say is that the harmonisation of the rules, as we said before, it's not the be-all and end-all. It can't be the only solution. It's a part of a wider question of addressing Moldova's political economy, the structure of economic, political and social power relations in the country. That has to be done in Moldova itself. It can't be done by anyone else. The association agreement can help, but that's mainly a question for Moldovan society. And I don't want to shy away from there's lessons that Moldova can learn, the things that the EU joiners have done wrong. There's some things that Moldova should avoid, and I'll try to point out those. The second one is to point out that this association agreement, as Adrian said earlier, not to raise expectations too high. It's going to be happening in a very difficult external environment. We really haven't recovered from the 2008-9 crisis. We're still living through it, as the last jitters on the international market showed last week when the bonds and currency started to fall. In the EU, it's having a very weak recovery and it's under threat from deflation. Deflation is probably the most serious macroeconomic risk to any economy and can do tremendous damage over a long period. And it's what essentially caused the Great Depression in America. Another one is that this is a more philosophical point, we're sort of in between economic paradigms. An economic paradigm is a sort of broad consensus on the general rules that leads to economic growth and higher living standards. Before the war it was classical economy, in the war, after the war it was Keynesianism, then there was the new right, or sometimes it's called neoliberalism. Now we're in a phase where people are still using the policies and ideas of the past, new ideas are coming about and it hasn't really cohered. And I think that sounds a bit frightening, but it's also an opportunity. It's not like the West has all the answers. Moldova will also be part of finding out what the answer to that question is. Obviously, another external thing that's going to make it difficult is the worst fallout in EU-Russia relations since the end of the Cold War. This is not just a political question, which is important, it's an economic one, because it will suppress the sanctions that the EU put on Russia will damage the EU economy for the short term, and Russia's interventions in Ukraine will damage its long-term growth path, and those are the two main Moldovan economic partners. So at the bottom I put a picture of Lehman Brothers, which is cast in a way the picture of the heading of Lehman Brothers to show that we're still in the economic crisis. And the bottom is a sort of quote from Gramsci's. It's the approach that Moldova, not just Moldova, anyone should take, is more experimental towards economic policy, more pragmatic and more realistic. And his phrase for that is optimism of the will and pessimism of the intellect. Which we say in England, hope for the best, plan for the worst. This is my more specific conclusions. I think when you look at the data of the EU joiners, the most dangerous thing, the most damaging thing is some kind of destabilisation, whether it's economic, financial, political, or war. Those are the things that damage people's welfare and incomes. So some of the things I'll come on to later, the investment that Moldova should try to attract. These next 2 points are fairly common economic recommendations, and my second two are sort of a bit more idiosyncratic. So it's specific kinds of non-destabilising investment. First one is make use of your own resources better. And here the key is banking system. As I've talked to the people from Expert-Grup before, and we've discussed this, what's needed is to raise the rate of saving by using remittances, by making the banking sector safe, and so that it can lend to small producers who need to improve their performance so that they can export. That's another question of institutions, that's another question of business practice, and hopefully the EU harmonisation of business rules will help there. FDI, one of the things before the 2008-9 crisis is a lot of people borrowed from abroad and it led to the destabilisation of the economy through producing big current account deficits. So one of the lessons is perhaps attract FDI to export sectors specifically encourage, you want it anyway, but specifically to export sectors, because then the money coming out going to the investors is offset by the earnings coming in from exports, and that reduces vulnerability to external corrections or fluctuations on the external market, which no single country can control. My second normal economic point, which relates to the aspects of the free trade rule and increasing including ordinary people money, is education. This is the cry of Tony Blair, and it was also the slogan of Lenin. Uczyca. Because not only is human capital formation the most important thing in terms of long-term development and higher wages, which is one of the plans of the Moldovan government. But it's also, I think, as I said, the free trade agreement will lead to economic disruption. So retraining programs will be an important part of ensuring social cohesion and that people do well through the transition and they start to identify it. My second two recommendations are a bit more off the wall, but in the spirit of my own recommendation of experimentation, I put an idea of budgetary, participatory budget from Porto Alegre in Brazil. This is quite a radical idea where the local citizens take part from beginning to end in a detailed process of budget recommendation in coordination with specialists and technical specialists. But the main point from what we're talking about in social inclusion is that it boosts civil society. And countries with stronger civil societies, the more participation will be because they do better economically in terms of economic welfare. My final point of suggestions is economic education. I think one of the weaknesses of economic education, especially in the West, is it's very narrowly based. It's usually based on a set textbook and maths. And this has led economists to be quite gullible to fashions in the day and to not see obvious mistakes in it and to pursue little models that they dare be courageous enough to say, hold on, this will lead somewhere else. I think the recommendation for that is to make economists study economic history and the history of economic thought, because then they would see that ideas come out of specific situations and sometimes they live beyond their utility, and that's often the case that happens. So, my next slide, right, I'm on to the interesting graphs now. I can't say anything else except to show what's exactly happened here over the whole transition period for the last 23 years, because everything else that's happened reflects that. I've done the European CIS countries in warmer colours and the EU joiners in greens and blues. So you can immediately see that Poland, which is dark blue, is the main gainer from the whole transition. Its economy is 130% bigger in real terms than it was in 1990. The two main losers are Moldova and Ukraine, because as you can see at the bottom there, the orange and the red lines, they're still about a third less, their economies are about a third less of the size than they were in 1990. The chief lesson from that for me, and I remember thinking at college, is that what happened, one of the big mistakes made was they applied Western rules, macroeconomic rules, to a different microeconomic situation, and it led to supply breakages. And I think this ties in with my theme, which is political economy. The reason at the start of the transition, Ukraine's economy was a third bigger than Moldova's, and today it's a third less. And the reason that is what we call in economics rent-seeking. This is essentially the same as saying the fusion of the old nomenclatura and the new business people and the art and mafia in various combinations in different countries. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about political economy. This is the main positive one that shows that the EU joiners did better. It shows what share of GDP, real GDP per head, they are in relation to Germany at the beginning and the end of 2000 to 2013 when the EU joining process started. You can see that the EU joiners did best. Estonia is the best, it improved 20 points, Poland's another 15 points, and the main losers are at the bottom. Although everyone's improved, even Moldova's improved, it's got 4 percentage points higher, but its GDP is only 9%. GDP is only 9% of Poland's. This is the main negative one, and I won't go too much, but you can see the reds and the oranges are on high part of the chart. That means that Moldova and Ukraine and Russia grew faster than the EU joiners throughout the 2000s. It's partly because they were caught up because they had such bad 90s, and it's partly commodity prices. You can see the oil price there and Russia's GDP at the bottom below. I'll rush now. The main case study is Estonia, which did the things like I said before. It borrowed from abroad, it funded a consumer boom, and then it had a massive current account which led to a huge adjustment and a gigantic fall. That's the green line, the bright green line. Croatia has never recovered from the 2008-9 crisis. So I'm going to go from there. These are the main differences in cash flow rates for explanations. I'll say the same one again, it's state capacity, and it's political economy, and it's addressing business practices. These aren't essential to the argument, but they're just interesting. This shows the Gini index for all these same countries. Gini index is a measure of inequality, and you can see, I've only put from 1999 to 2012, in the previous decade, massive increases in inequality in Moldova and Ukraine and Russia. In the previous decade, you can see that EU joiners, the inequality has started to come down broadly, although it's only as a company, which is the green line. You can see that the spread of inequality at the bottom graph is still wider in the European CIS countries, with Moldova's, which is the red line, has come down dramatically. This is human development index. Sometimes it's criticised that GDP per head isn't sufficient way of measuring human welfare, so we have a wider one, which is GDP per head, it's life expectancy, and it's literacy, and it's pretty much the same thing. Terrible for Moldova and Ukraine in the first decade, quite strong improvement in Romania and Moldova in the second, and then modest improvements for the CIS countries, but much stronger for the EU joiners. That's my end of my presentation. Thank you.